All right. We're gonna get kicked off. I'm sure there will be a bunch of people that will funnel in, but let's get started. Hi everyone. My name is Misha Bartlett. I'm the head of sales at Pando. I'm also one of the founding team members at Pando, so have been on this journey since inception for the past 4 years or so as we're thinking about ways to transform performance and development, which very closely aligns with our conversation today. So I'm excited to connect you to the panelists that we have. Today we have Bree Sykes, who's the L&D business partner from TripAdvisor. We have Jasmine Francis from Pliancy, who's the former head of people, and Ali O'Connor from Duolingo, who's a senior program manager. So I will hand it over to our panelists to do a deeper introduction on themselves, and then we will get started. Bree, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, no problem. So as Misha mentioned, I am Bree. I work at TripAdvisor in the L&OD organization. My career path has been a little bit different. I have actually spent most of my career as an HR business partner, and have just recently moved into the learning and development space. So excited to be here, and excited to have this opportunity to reflect on growth.
Cool. I'll
I
go
can go
next.
next. You
Oh,
go.
sorry, Bree. My name is Allie. I'm currently based in New York, but I will be moving to Pittsburgh, where Duolingo is headquartered. I've spent about the last 8 years in hypergrowth tech, so mobility has always been something that's just a way of working. I'm also a product of a lot of mobility myself. I started my career in recruiting, moved into program management, and now I'm fully in the talent development space. So excited to talk about this topic.
Okay, I will jump in. I'm Jasmine Francis, most formerly the head of people in DEIB at Pliancy. I've been in the people space for about 16 years, and I'm really, really excited to jump into this topic. I think there is just kind of like this assumption that when we talk about career development, we've got to be talking about promotions, and it means so much more than that. And I think it's so much more enriching than what people think they know. So I'm really excited to jump in. Thanks for letting me be here.
Amazing. Amazing. So we're going to talk about growth mindset, mobility and development without promotions. So today we want to cover things like how can we think about embedding a growth mindset into the culture of the company? What are some programs that our lovely panelists here have implemented that help to encourage a focus on employee development? And how can we set expectations and create transparency into what career mobility options can look like? So that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm curious from the audience here, who has ever seen an employee get promoted purely to retain them in the business? Not necessarily because they've shown any specific performance or career development. Let me know in the chat, or we can do a thumbs up. Lisa? Many times. Tahini, yep. Okay. So we've all seen it, right? So what we want to talk about is how can we think about embedding more of a growth mindset into the organization? And what can we do in times when we can't be promotion happy and we can't just pull everybody into a conversation and let them know that they're going to get this, amazing uptick in pay and title without some of the other pieces that align with that. So as we jump into this conversation, this is very much going to be conversational. So please drop any questions that you have into the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end, but we'll go through questions as they come up. So the first thing we'll start to kind of frame our conversation today is what motivates and drives a heavy promotion versus career development culture at the leadership, management, and IC level. Let's start with Allie.
I've seen in the past promotions are really excited for people who are very green in their career. It feels like the logical next step. It feels like it's a continuation of the track that they're currently on, high school to college to internship to great company, and then the next thing that happens is a promotion. So a lot of the time I've seen with more junior folks, it's this focus on title and the development and mastery of skills kind of falls to the wayside. So a big piece of it is upskilling managers to get them talking about the development and the skills that are needed to get to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Bree and Jasmine.
I think a lot of what drives heavy promotion at that level or at any level really is assumptions. I think a lot of people make assumptions on, what is the right path based on what we're all told over the course of our lives as we're growing up, as we're in school, right? The things that we see in movies and popular culture. And there's a lot of assumption that, becoming a leader, especially becoming a people leader, right? So someone who's a manager of others is the way to go if you're going to grow. And that's not necessarily true. So I just think that assumption that that is the path to growth. And if you're not going there, you're not growing, is something that really drives a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just really piggyback on what both Bree and Ali are saying. I think, I think from a societal perspective, it's ingrained in us that the higher you get, the more money you get, the more successful you are. And I think a lot of times organizations and people, including myself, forget that learning and growth is holistic. It's not just upward, right? You can learn so many different things and apply those skills in so many different ways in so many different companies. So I think not only that, but also just to what Ali was saying, just managers and even at the leadership level, being very intentional about understanding that money and title isn't the only thing that drives and motivates people. Some people just want to understand the industry that they're in so that they can become SMEs in the next role. Some people just want to master their skill sets. And it's not always about title. And so I do think just creating an atmosphere and environment where there's a breadth of learning, whether it's vertical, it's horizontal, it's diagonal, not only behooves the organization, but also the people within it.
I would
Yeah.
add to that. Of course, I think learning is extremely important. I work in learning and organizational development, but I also think there's an element of fun that we miss a lot of times when we're thinking about our career growth and being in tune to what you enjoy doing and focusing on that can be really important. And we miss that mark a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times what we hear from our clients is when organizations are promotion heavy, it's typically a fear reaction to losing talent and not thoroughly thinking through and understanding how can we do this in a meaningful way. There are often times where people come to us and they're very top heavy because they've just promoted and they have 15 SVPs and a 150 person organization, and they're trying to figure out, how do I right size this? How do I fix this? And that's very challenging to do. There's a lot of challenging conversations that have to happen after that takes place. So thinking through how can we be more strategic and thoughtful about the approach before we get to that point is a lot of what we do with our customers that aren't there. And with that said, when you think about what needs to happen first, a lot of it is mindset. Some managers or leaders could come from companies that are promotion happy, or they do have the resources in order to promote very regularly, and that's just the culture of the organization. So I'm curious, from all of you, when you think about the mindset shifts that need to happen within the organization, what does that look like? How do you even approach that from the beginning?
I think that the mindset, I mean, there's so many parts of this to me. So please stop me if I talk too much because this is something that I just think is really interesting. I think one thing, that fear that you mentioned, is really something that people have to get over for multiple reasons, right? If we have people leaving the organization who feel like they have been developed in the right ways, that they've been listened to, that have been engaged, and they're leaving just because another opportunity that suits them better is out there and calling them, great. We have had someone leave the organization as an advocate and someone who will help us attract talent to the organization from elsewhere, right? They're going to be talking about us in a positive way out in the marketplace. And you can't have anything better than that, right? It's just going to have one talent leave and another talent enter, right? And that's a great thing for the business because you never want anyone to stay stagnant. That makes your business stagnant. I also think the mindset shift has to happen in thinking about people and development as a part of your broader strategy, right? Your business strategy and your people strategy have to be aligned.
Brie, I love how you bring up people who leave the company who had a great experience, really being carriers of employer brand. I've seen promotions or they're usually reactive. You usually have someone who's saying, I really want to get promoted. And managers are like, well, we have to do everything we can to keep them. And then what they're kind of being trained, what their brain is telling them is if I ask for it, I'm going to get it. And it starts creating this whole expectation that if I ask for a promotion, I'll be promoted. And if not, I'll leave, and all of the exciting things that go into development are kind of, left or put to the wayside. Um, I've seen some pretty fun stories told with data to help shift the mindset around that. That kind of, if I ask, then I will get, kind of wears out after a while. You see engagement start to drop. You see employees who are really only giving 50% because there's no rigor around them working harder. So I love the idea of it's okay to lose someone as long as their experience was really, really great, and putting every effort you can into developing them so they are that carrier of the employer brand.
I love that.
And I
I
love
love,
everything that's, go ahead.
man, go ahead.
I was just say I love everything that's been mentioned thus far. I have found that a lot of the organizations that we're calling promotion happy are organizations that really don't have infrastructure around what promotions mean and what's the criteria for promotions and how do you go about advocating for yourself? How do you make sure your manager is in the loop and understands your career aspirations? And so I would just, I mean, from my perspective, I think just kind of taking a step back and pulling the layers back of what is a promotion. A promotion is when you are meeting the standard of excellence of the organization per their, definition at that specific level, right? And so how do I attain those skills? What do I need to do to get those skills that I'm missing per the matrix? What do I need to do to step up more and be a leader, no matter what my level is within the organization? And that way, I think that's a different mindset from saying I'm just hooked on the promotion as it is an entity versus I need to understand and obtain all the things within the promotion, meaning the skill sets, the leadership, the attitude, et cetera, to get there.
Yeah, what does anybody have I'm just thinking about like examples of ways that some of the people that are on the call with us could think about resetting those expectations for employees and managers. Do you have any ideas around that you could share?
Yeah, I think leaders telling stories is always really inspiring for people to hear. For them to hear that, hey, I felt like I was stagnant in my career for a couple years, but in that time, I was able to explore things that are fun, things that are lateral responsibilities, but are different from what you're used to. I've seen some incredible people who have worked in C-suites who have worked between different functions. So they spent time in the product org and now they're the CTO. Someone who's early in their career, they don't really think about that person's journey being that exciting and that more like that lattice style. They think of someone just shooting to the top, and that's how you get to C-suite. So finding every opportunity to tell stories, to have leaders kind of give their perspective and their experience, the good and the bad, kind of humanizes the experience of career growth outside of the career just vertical growth.
I also think it's important for leaders to actively model the behavior they want to see in others, right? So if I'm saying that the path to growth is not always equal promotion. How am I reinforcing that message to you? Stories are really important, but also bringing those opportunities to you, right? Identifying skills that we need as a business that you might be able to help us fill where we have gaps. Presenting opportunities for projects, or talking to you about someone that I've encountered either internally or outside of the workplace in my network who might be able to help you grow in an area that you've expressed interest, right? Being able to put people and connect people with those opportunities, I think is really important. And vocalizing also as a leader what you're doing to work on opportunities for yourself, to make it clear that these things are important and accepted and expected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that we see too is having transparent career frameworks can be really valuable because people can actually gain an understanding of not only what their own expectations are, but what other areas of the business they might be interested in moving into based off of what they're focused on from a skills and development perspective. So having that clarity and that visibility to understand that gives them a better understanding of, oh, what are the things that they're working on and how do they exemplify those
Mhm.
behaviors? How can I move into that or start to build up those skill sets if I do want to move into that area? So we found that to be a really powerful way to support the team in understanding some of the mobility just by making those transparent. So it's not just something that they're seeing from, their side of the business. Um, from a motivation perspective, I think this is one of the things that came up when we initially started talking about this topic is the the reality is people want to be promoted because they want the money, right? Like people want more money, they want to make more money, especially in the economy that we're in. Um, People want to be acknowledged, they want to be recognized, they want to be valued, they want to understand their value. And so I think one of the things that can be difficult when you're having conversations with employees who look at the promotion as all of those things, um, how do we shift and motivate employees to focus on career development as opposed to only promotions? Jasmine, do you wanna jump in on that one?
Sure. Yeah. I think you bring up a really good point that a lot of times when people feel stuck, they're like, this promotion is going to get me out of this situation because I'm going to have new responsibilities and my remit is going to look totally different. It's the case, especially in a lot of organizations that, promote very easily. Sometimes your scope just does not change. And so, at my previous organization, Pliancy, the awesome, amazing people team, who I know many of them are on this call now, put together an internal mobility opportunity programming for the organization. And with us being in an organization that was really about consultants, 75% of them were consultants, they started to feel kind of like I'm doing the same thing. I have a new client, helping them with their computers. All right, what else does life give me? Right. And so, they started to get curious and understanding what does like business development look like? What does it look like if I join the people team and just understood how it feels to be on the opposite side of that? And so we wanted to kind of really remove those barriers and say, here, this is our new internal mobility framework. And before we post an opportunity externally, we're going to post it on our First Dibs Slack channel, and we're going to give you a certain amount to apply, a certain amount of time to apply, and we're going to give you priority in the process. And I think from a learning perspective, not only did that get people really excited and hopeful and motivated, but it also helped to sharpen their interviewing skills. It also helped to sharpen how they articulate the things that they've learned and what they're looking for in their next position. So for those people that may not have been selected for the opportunities, they at least have learned that they can level themselves up professionally in how they promote, how they show up for themselves. We had great turnout. I think within a couple months we had, 5, 6, 7 people participate, and the feedback was really awesome.
That's amazing. I love to hear those results because I think you said it was in a pretty short period of time, right? It was in like a few months. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there was some hunger there
Yeah.
for it.
Great. I'm curious from the audience here, has anybody else initiated any programs that have helped to motivate employees when it comes to just focusing more on career development over promotions? If you want to drop it in the chat, we can do some more sharing here, but I'm curious of some of the other things that have come up as well for the group. So, as we think about career development programs, like so the actual programming. Um, I know Ali and Jasmine, we've talked a bit about some of the programs that you've implemented. Ali, do you want to just talk about the onboarding program that you implemented that supported career development or that was wrapped around your career development initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. So after internal mobility took off and we had people moving teams, we realized that there was a serious need for some kind of formal onboarding when someone had moved from one team to another team, whether they were doing the same job under a different manager or if they had a totally different landscape, now doing a completely different plate of work. The feeling from managers was, hey, I have someone on my team who has this awesome log of performance. They've done so great here. They understand the ins and outs of the company. And what was kind of forgotten was like, this is still a new experience for someone. Like to them, we are restarting the clock. This is a brand new job. So we went back and we realized like, hey, we need to formally onboard people. And we really just ripped a template from our onboarding of external hires and we trained our managers that when you receive an internal transfer or an internal move onto your team, just having that intentionality around welcoming them to the team. Tell them what meetings they're going to be a part of. Tell them your ways of working. Be sensitive to their learning curve. There might be some things that they've never experienced before that you might not even realize. So that need for onboarding, it was an easy one to miss. We were just like, hey, we're moving people around and they've been here already and they're great, but to really make sure that that employee was set up for success and that their experience was exciting and not like overwhelming and scary. That onboarding piece was super helpful for employees and managers to ramp up effectively in their new role.
Yeah, and what I love about that is if other employees are seeing that, they're seeing that they're actually being set up for success, that'll drive more people to be interested in considering as opposed to that feeling of, well, I'm comfortable here. I'm worried I won't be set up for success over here. I haven't worked for this manager before. And so it mitigates some of those concerns that employees have as they're thinking about navigating, switching, all of the, natural human fears that come up with that. Jasmine, do you want to jump in on the program you developed?
Sure, yeah. So in a previous organization of mine, we were dealing with the exact same thing that we're talking about that we're all dealing with. And we found that creating a mentorship program actually worked really, really well. And I see a question here about, how do you really get your population to understand the difference between, growth and promotions, where promotions is a type of growth, but it's not the only way to grow. Um, with the mentorship program, or, it doesn't have to feel so heavy, right? Having an opportunity to just to talk to different people within the organization, regardless of the level, regardless of how long they've been there, and just share what you know, share what's worked, share what's not worked. Just like we see with the panelists here, we've kind of all had our own navigation of the journey, right? And so there's not one way to kind of get to where you're meant to be. And the more exposure you get to that and understanding other people's journeys, the more it can really open your mind of like, oh, it doesn't have to be a traditional trajectory where I do A, B, C in a vertical order. I can do this, that, and the other. And not to steal somebody else's shine, but when we were rehearsing this and kind of sharing some ideas previous to this, it was also mentioned that it doesn't have to be a mentorship program internally. It can be, managers, leaders, others connecting people with external folks to say, okay, not only can we provide maybe more of a a psychologically safe space for you for some people, but also here's someone outside the industry, someone that you've never even met before. Listen to their journey. But I think it kind of just helps to normalize the conversation. And the other thing I would say, just to answer this question, is the values. An organization's values is really everything. And I think a lot of times people sleep on how strong you can really bake that into the ways of working of an organization. And when your values are right, for example, say a value is, stretching to learn, or pushing, outside the limits, or thinking outside of the box. Those types of values really set the stage that, hey, as an organization, we are all about growth, not necessarily saying you have to get promotion, but we want you to grow, whether it's attending DEIB meetings and sharing your experience, whether it's, leading the interns, something you've never done before. But we're all about you widening your scope of understanding of the world. And that is what we value. And that's actually how you get promoted within this organization. So I just think from a foundational perspective, the values is, I would say a low hanging fruit as far as an execution perspective with deciding what it is, but it's an easy way for everyone to come together and start to live it, and really, show that this is an example of what we appreciate within this organization.
I also have a couple of thoughts on the question that was posted in the chat. I think that, the question in the spirit of how do you have that conversation with a leader and start to redirect them, just thinking about development in a different way and not always equaling promotions. I think data is one thing that's really important. I know that Ali mentioned data earlier. Something that we've done in our organization is actually collect some data from employees about the career path that they're interested in, whether or not those are um, people who want to be promoted into other roles, or people who are just interested in growing within their own role. And I think sometimes you'd be surprised by the number of people who will be vocal about the fact that they just want to grow in their own role. They just want to work on projects in their own space. So data can be a really important part of that. I also think it's important to bring back to managers, what does the employee want? What have they expressed that they are interested in? Have you had that conversation with them before jumping to the point that they must want a promotion, right? That might not be the path for everyone. And I think when you really ask employees to reflect on what it is that they're looking for, you'll get a lot of different answers, and they're not always going to equal promotion. And so making sure that the manager has had some really strong conversations, maybe presenting them with some possible questions they can ask the employee that they're working with to get to the bottom of what will really help keep that person engaged and keep that person growing and developing in a different way.
Yeah, Brie, I love that point so much. Something that I encourage managers to do is just ask why. A lot of the times you have folks are, I want to be a manager, I want this. And it's like, well, why? Well, why? And once you start to really like get down to the bottom of that why funnel, you get this one little nugget that's so easy to just get in front of them. I want to be in front of a room presenting. Awesome. Let's find an opportunity for you to do that. And finding those like tiny little pieces of this overall goal is such an effective way for managers to show their employee that they're growing without promotion.
Oh, so much good stuff. So much good stuff in everything that everyone said. I also think one of the other things that we see too is which you all have kind of touched on earlier is just the modeling. Like from a leadership perspective, are leaders showing that they're growing? Do your managers understand how they need to develop? What are the skill sets that they're working on? And with that, their own experience through that, sometimes it can be much easier for them to help support their team. So we see that especially when we're building out the career frameworks and the rubrics, there isn't just a rubric for employees. There's a rubric and a career track for managers, so they understand what skills am I developing within, and what does it mean for me to be developing within these skills at my level, etc. So that they also have that framing for what does growth look like for me, and then I can relay a similar message to my employees. So I think that's really been helpful also in shifting. Tahini, I know you mentioned continuous develop and trying to decouple the idea. But I think that there's a lot of value in making sure that people have experienced it themselves, because those managers probably haven't experienced a manager support them in their own development in a meaningful way. It's been around performance.
Even at such a basic level, I think that time is a big challenge for a lot of people that we don't get past as quickly as we should. So, in that modeling that the time that you spend to work on development activities is important and encouraged and supported. Because a lot of employees don't feel like it's appropriate to spend their work time, working on development. And it's not always about, going to a 3-day conference. It could be about reading a few articles, tapping into a good podcast or an audiobook that helps you grow, just giving people the space to be able to work on some of these items can really help people feel engaged.
Yeah, I love that. It doesn't have to feel so big,
Mhm.
right? And formal. We can recognize growth in small day-to-day things and improvement in small day-to-day things. I really like that. So just bringing us to our next thought here. I wanted to think about some of the things that you didn't realize would be an integral part of thinking about driving this shift within the business and this focus on career development. So we can start Allie or Bree or Jasmine, whoever wants to jump in. But I'm curious, what were some of the Jack in the box, like pop out things that you didn't realize were gonna sneak up on you?
Yeah, I can hop in. The amount of marketing that goes into these programs, we're on the people team, we're building out these programs, and you build them, you send the email, and you're like, awesome, now everyone knows how to grow, and it's going to be great. But the reality is, this might be top of mind for you all the time on the people team, but folks aren't really thinking about this all the time. So finding ways to constantly just inject this into the business, making that message become like common speak. It's a ton of work. It's a ton of work. It takes a ton of creativity. Um, but in the end, you have employees who are starting to parrot the messages that you've kind of peppered in throughout the organization in a bunch of different ways.
And I would just really piggyback on what you said, Ali. The marketing, yes, and to what you touched on, the communications and how things are communicated within the organization. It has a direct impact on how people, I'm sorry, my dog is barking, how they understand what is happening. And so we actually had an internal communications person on our team, which really did wonders for us and the organization because, like you said, from a people perspective, we get it. But how do we speak the language of our people? And not only that, it's not a one size fits all. How do we speak the language of different people from different walks of life on different teams with different levels and really personalizing messages in a way that speaks and engages them? And also kind of just like sprinkling it everywhere, right? And making sure that the people, especially managers, are comfortable talking about this because at the end of the day, it's so easy for people to say, yeah, management made that decision. Yeah, I don't know. This is a mandate from the top. This is what we have to do. Versus, your manager or your peer or whoever saying, oh, yeah, this is actually pretty cool. I heard that, da 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 da. Or I read that if you da da da, you can da da da. So making sure that people can speak to it, giving them the resources, I think is important. And just being thoughtful about being empathetic and putting yourself in somebody else's journey and how they will receive these messages, I think is a game changer.
That's huge. It's a consideration with all of these programs, right? Like in different cultures, even when we think about feedback, and most of our customers are focused on enabling continuous feedback, but that looks and feels different for employees in the US versus employees in Germany or, Italy or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's something that we definitely face as a global organization. And it's so important to be conscious of that, right? It's so important to be conscious of making sure that your message hits in all of the places where you have people and all of the cultures where you have people. And that can be really tough, right? A lot of us are working with small teams. And that can be a really tough thing, but it's something that if you work toward and can overcome, can go a really long way.
Yeah, that's great. So, I'm looking at the time. I know we've got like 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we leave some space for questions. So I want to wrap up our initial conversation here with just a tactical takeaway from each of you that you'd want to leave everyone here with.
I can go first. So I think my tactical tip, as you called it, which is a nice little alliteration, uh, I think it's something so simple. I think it's just to ask, right? Ask more questions than you're asking today. Have people on your team really reflect on what it is that they are looking to do in their career journey. Something that we did with some of our ERGs at TripAdvisor, but also we've done with intact teams, is called journey mapping, where someone can really take that time, that dedicated time to reflect back on what it is that they've done over their career, what motivated them, and then being able to use that to have that conversation, right? So asking good questions, also asking good questions of those in your own network, right? You don't have to have all the answers. When your employee says that they're interested in becoming an engineer and right now they work in marketing, right? You don't need to know the exact path to take them there. There are other people that you know in your network, internally or externally, who can help you with that. So I just think asking the right questions instead of making assumptions is the most important thing.
I can go for sure. I mentioned this earlier, but just the power of stories is so, so huge. What it really starts with is like getting your leadership team on board, like have them understand the ROI of like really meaningful development. And then they're going to start coming to you and saying, hey, we have an Eng Summit coming up. Can you present at this? Or there's an opportunity to add this into our weekly newsletter that goes out to the entire group. So really just get the organization talking about it, telling stories, sharing experiences, and make navigating your career not something that's only managed by the people team or only lives in a document. It's something that people are thinking all the time.
Okay, it's kind of hard to follow up after those two really, really great points. Let's see. I would say, give yourself grace as a people person. Kind of to what Bree was saying, we don't always have the answers, and that's okay. Every organization is different, every culture is different, every person is different. And so to think that there's a one size fits all that you can just take and drop to the next organization, it's impossible, right? And it wouldn't really be serving our people. So I would say, from a people perspective, just remain curious. If you're seeing that you're not really getting the impact that you want with something else, think about something different. It's okay. I think, remain out of the box and bring your people along their journey with you. What we don't want is that didn't work. So tomorrow we're going to try this. That didn't work because people get confused, right? That's a lot of change fatigue. But instead say, okay, we're going to try this. If we're not seeing the results that we're getting, we're going to ask to what you were saying, Bree. We're going to remain curious and we're going to bring people along the journey. Let's hear from them. What do they want to see? The pressure doesn't always have to be on us, and it can really be a collaborative effort.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Does anybody have any questions that we can socialize together as a group here? Drop them in the chat. We did have one question come through that we can start with. The question is, how have you dealt with really difficult teams who were resistant to not having as many promotions as they were used to each year?
I think, that's something that I've definitely seen a lot of. And going back to what I was saying earlier, you can't please everyone, right? I think as an organization, there is a time to get business minded. And we're all at different journeys and different phases organizationally. But when you get to the point where you feel a little bit more business minded, I think it's less about trying to appease those people who are used to those back-to-back promotions, and more so getting them in the mindset of we are a business, right? And so we do need to think a little bit more thoughtfully, intentionally about what it takes to get a promotion. And maybe what that'll mean for you is you might not be able to get a promotion as often, but maybe your pay will jump a lot higher, right? Maybe your scope of work will actually change versus just kind of getting that title and then you're just moving, moving, moving. We want as an organization to make this valuable to you. And the way for us to do that is to, to what you were saying, Misha, have a competency matrix, have job architecture, make sure we're providing a plethora of opportunities of learning in a plethora of different ways. That it doesn't happen overnight, right? But I think eventually some of those teams start to understand, okay, I may not like it, but at least I'm going to take something from it. At least I know what my North Star is, and they're providing me a way to get there. So they want me to succeed. It just may not be as fast as I would define my definition of success.
Allie or Bree, do you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
I was just going to go back to data, and I was trying not to repeat myself because I really think that data is important here when you're combating a team that is very adamant about, needing to promote everyone at a certain cadence every year, right? Like, let's think about all the other factors that go into employees' engagement and an employee's development. And having that data to show that in many cases, promotions are just a band-aid, especially when they're done in a way that's not a business-driven, data-driven decision, right? We see a lot, both in my role as an HR business partner before and now in my role in LNOD, people who were promoted when they really shouldn't have been will leave the organization very quickly, right? It's not necessarily what everybody truly wants and is not really what's going to drive them to stay. So just being conscious of that and trying to, wherever you can, bring back the data to show a team or a leader what this could look like in a year or two from now if we make this decision and continue to follow this process.
Yeah. Just to be hyper tactical here, because data is something that can feel a little bit scary. Those kinds of projections can be so straightforward. If you have an
Mhm.
organization that's promoting half of their team, take that number of people, move them into that salary band, say, let's say the half of them are going, and then subtract the difference in cost. And you can say, hey, you're going to spend $150,000 on promotions alone. And those like little nuggets of information, they're so easy to get to that it will take a couple of minutes to do. That one line will make a leader say, oh my God, well, that's like my entire budget for the entire year and then some. And really have them pause. So data doesn't have to be scary. You just have, and you don't need a whole team or system to make it happen. You just have to think about what you have in your hands right now and what stories you need to tell, and then just find a way to tell them.
I'm just going to circle back because you all made me think of something else. Great, great points is that what there should always be a business justification when somebody's getting promoted. What will this person be taking on? How will their scope of work be changing? Who will they now be overseeing? How will they now be aligning to different parts of the business? Otherwise, to what you all are saying, there's really not going to be an ROI. Budgets are completely busted. And at the end of the day, we're going to start to see an uptick in attrition.
Someone in the chat asked a question for me around the type of data on promotions versus band-aids preventing turnover. I look at a few things. I always go back to our engagement data. So wherever we have engagement data, that we can show that, looking at last year, we had X number of promotions and that shifted our engagement data by X amount can really show the type of shift that you can make and engagement, because I think that people think that it's going to solve all their problems, and it does not solve all their problems, right? There's still going to be a lot of data points in that engagement data that are things that could be worked on. I also think that you can model out in a very quick way what their organization would look like if they continue this trend, right? And how many one-to-one relationships they're going to have, particularly if they're promoting people into management roles where they need to have a direct report, right? And you get to a certain point where that's also going to become stagnant because you can only have so many people on the team with your budget. You're only going to have so many managers, and those managers are going to quickly also become disengaged when they are not continuing to grow as a leader by having larger teams with a larger scope of influence, right? So by modeling out what this might look like future state shows them that there's there's a lot of limits to what they're doing. It's short-sighted. It's a short-sighted viewpoint, right? And being able to then, on the flip side of that, talk about how engagement results are impacted when someone has been developed, or even looking at data outside of the organization if you don't have it internally. There's a ton of statistics around this out there that you can pull to give them some interesting things to look at, some things to consider to show how long term, these decisions really do have an impact, and you'll still end up in the same boat you are today with a lack of engaged employees.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think a lot of our customers are really trying to figure out how to focus on employee lifetime value. So how do we elevate the entire business together as opposed to just thinking about these points in time where we're promoting people and driving them to create more business impact, but without having the skill sets in order to do that? And how does that impact the business and the outcomes that we're trying to get to? And so I think employee lifetime value is also a really interesting metric to dig into and baseline today versus once you initiate some of these initiatives, how do they impact the business over the years? Well, great. We would love to take more questions. So if you have questions, please send them to us. We are at the end of time. This hour flew by. So thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you to our panelists. And for anybody who wants to talk about brain-friendly change management strategies, we have Life Lab learnings coming up next. So you can join that next session and learn about how to lead change with those change management strategies. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.